So, hello dear colleagues and friends from Ukraine. I'm very proud that I got the information and the invitation to take part at this beautiful meeting. And I remember the meetings, my discussion, the meetings that I attended before. This is one of them, it's in Lviv. The other one was in Kiev, and I must start with the picture with Vladislav. All of us loved him and appreciate his work very, very much, and we are missing him, and I am very, very proud to have the opportunity to speak with you. And all the time I'm thinking about Vladislav, about his family, and about all your beautiful country, all the people in the country. So to my topic of the speech is treatment options, to tell something about news in the treatment options of the osteoporosis. Let's start with the most simple question. So, who should be treated? You can see that we must focus on the primary fracture prevention. It's surely the best way, but it's the hardest way because we need really a lot of densitometry equipment and so on. So the organization for the primary fracture prevention is much more difficult than for the secondary fracture prevention, and I will show you data, and the data are not very promising from some European countries, Slovakia included, that we have a lot of work in the secondary prevention, not only in the primary. So why it's more simple and more important to focus on the secondary prevention? Because it's much more easy to identify the patient who should be treated, the impact of the high concentration of fractures in a homogeneous group of patients. We can find them very, very quickly if we do that, and we are thinking about that. And we can expect very large effect from the intervention, and unfortunately it's really a huge problem, although it's so simple. And you can see that in the highest risk of the next fracture are people who already fractured. So the subsequent fracture during 2 years following the first fracture is about 50% without any treatment. So it's very, very, very high, and the people are in very high risk of the next fracture. Who is interested in that? We have been part of this task force about secondary fracture prevention. It's a consensus what to do, and there are some basic recommendations what we should do in these patients, and you can find that in journal Bone Research from 2020. So what are the principles of the care of patients suffering from the osteoporosis? There are some general principles. It means all the time to eliminate known risk factors of the osteoporosis. Very important is to speak about falls with the patients, if there are any barriers, mostly in their flats, about the treatment who can lead to falls, or about bad sign and so on. So it's very, very important to speak about that, then to modify the eating habits, physical activity, then if it's necessary to use support therapy and to show the specific therapy later on. Before we will treat the patient, doesn't matter with drug we will use, we should mostly define the risk of the patient, but also to exclude the secondary form of osteoporosis. So routinely we recommend to do FRAX. I'm very glad that also Ukraine has own FRAX data, so I hope that you are performing this FRAX checking. Then to examine height and weight, it's very useful, and it can help you about the risk of or not only risk but already fractures in the mostly lumbar spine or in general in the spine. Then labs like blood cell count, sedimentation rate, calcium, albumin, creatinine, phosphate, and so on, so to exclude the secondary most frequent forms. But what's necessary to perform according to the bone, to perform lateral radiograph of lumbar and thoracic spine to exclude the fractures, sure the bone densitometry, when we have the possibility also to check the markers of bone turnover and levels of vitamin D. What's good, and we are performing that, is also to perform the lateral imaging with DEXA for the vertebral fracture assessment. If you are doing that, it's not necessary to use X-ray, and in the latest years we are using also TBS to check the bone quality. So coming to the treatment options, antibiotic agents, what's necessary to know that all of them should prevent fractures, and they mostly improve the bone turnover, then they increase the bone cortical and trabecular bone mass, that means bone mineral density. They improve bone quality, not in the same way, but in general, the most important is if the antibiotic agents are able to decrease fracture risk, and if yes, so we are speaking only about these drugs who has shown this ability. In this slide you can see that most of the drugs what's on the market are able to reduce the fractures in postmenopausal women, that we can use them for prevention. They have data in the male osteoporosis, in glucocorticoid-induced osteoporosis, and in prevention of that. So not all of them have the data for all the indications, but all the drugs what we have data in the reduction of the fractures, vertebral fractures in postmenopausal women. There are many drugs which are already on the market 10 or more years. Some of bisphosphonates, denosumab, we have reloxifene, that means SERM, selective estrogen receptor modulator. We have teriparatide, but we have also some new drugs. I will a little bit speak about them, but some of drugs disappeared already from the market, like calcitonin or strontium ranelate, because of some side effects, or because of the risk of, in the case of calcitonin, of cancer, and in the case of strontium ranelate, of cardiovascular events. They will be, and I'm very glad that there will be many nice lectures about calcium and vitamin D, so it's only my one slide about the topic, that really all the treatment options should include the supplementation with vitamin D and calcium, and there are no trials with any of the drugs without supplementation of both of these. So what's about bisphosphonates? Bisphosphonates are the golden standard. Many years we have alendronate, risedronate, ibandronate, and zoledronate. All of them are very potent. There are options if you prefer the treatment with tablets or IV injections or infusions. So really you can individualize the treatment the patients. What's also very important, that the bisphosphonates, they have many good trials and also long-term trials, so we can see that for all of them we have data 3 or more years about the reduction of the fractures. But maybe it's not so known, but I think it's very important to know that bisphosphonates, and mostly the zoledronic acid, has also its own data in reduction of all-cause mortality. So that means in the mortality, not only in the field of osteoporosis, but in general. And there are many that not only a reduction of the fractures, that maybe also cardiovascular protection and so on. So it's something that should be taken in account in our decision making in the treatment options. We know that there is a small risk of the osteonecrosis of the jaw or subtrochanterical and diaphyseal fractures mostly, but in the risk are oncological patients or diabetic patients, and if we are treating them with higher doses of bisphosphonates, and the same we have for the denosumab, which is typical for the oncological patients. So in general, sure, we know that bisphosphonates have a very good relation between benefit and risk because of the huge reduction of all fractures in the women and also in men and also in patients who are treated with glucocorticoids. The other treatment which is very frequent, for instance, in our country, is the most popular treatment is using denosumab. You know, it's monoclonal antibody against rankle, and also denosumab works like anti-resorptive drug, which is similar than bisphosphonates, but you can see also from this slide that there is a difference, and the most important difference is that the effect of denosumab on osteoclast activity is reversible. That means if you stop the treatment, then the bone turnover goes. We have very good data with denosumab. Here are data from the trial where it was shown that after 36 months, denosumab reduced the new vertebral fractures, non-vertebral fractures, and also hip fractures. And there are very important data, and the first data what we have from the drugs, except of flexin in alendronate, that 10 years probability of the fractures is decreasing very continuously in the patients with who are treating 10 years with denosumab. So these data are showing that also after 10 years of the treatment, we can see the effect of the treatment. So if we are speaking about denosumab has perfect data for the reduction of the fractures, for the increase of BND. Huge topic is how to stop, because we know that it's quite risky about the multiple vertebral fractures to stop immediately the treatment, but it will be the topic of the speech of my friend Edward Czerwiński, so he will focus on this very, very important and recently discussed problem. What else we have or had, because be honest, nowadays there is no huge pipeline in the pharmaceutical companies according to the treatment of the osteoporosis. So one possibility was quite new, was the treatment with bezadoxifan with conjugated estrogens. Bezadoxifan belongs to the group of SERMs, selective estrogen receptor modulators, like raloxifene, but in this case it was combined with conjugated estrogens. You know that this is typical treatment of hormonal substitution in the US, and the combination of these two was effective on the reduction of vertebral fractures and also of non-vertebral fractures, and it's recommended for the treatment in women with some vasomotoric symptoms and with intact uterus. You can see that the treatment had quite nice data and was more effective than raloxifene. The other story, and we have been part of the trial, was use of odanakitib. what's a cathepsin K inhibitor. It was, and that leads the inhibition of cathepsin K leads to inhibition of bone resorption. So the pathophysiological background was very logic, and also the data about BMD were very promising, but unfortunately the treatment led to increased risk of stroke, and the trial was stopped. The other new molecule what we have is a new molecule which has which is related to PTH. We know that PTH is very frequently used, mostly the teriparatide 134 amino acid PTH, and it's reserved for the treatment of the patients suffering from very severe osteoporosis. Nowadays it's not so strict because we have also generics of the treatment, and this is the only treatment we see on these days which is frequently used as anabolic treatment. So you can see that the reduction of new vertebral fractures and also of non-vertebral fractures was shown in these high-risk patients. But what's new is that there is abaloparatide, which is molecule which is related to PTH-related peptide, and a little bit modified from the physiological PTH-related peptide, and the modification led to more anabolic effect of this treatment. And we have very nice data showing that abaloparatide led to reduction of new vertebral fractures and non-vertebral fractures, and not only in the if it was compared to placebo, but also it was against teriparatide. So it looks that abaloparatide is probably more effective. But unfortunately, in Europe, EMA stopped the use, or didn't accept the use of the treatment because of the possible negative effect on cardiovascular system. But in US the treatment is frequently used. It was accepted by FDA, and the treatment is ongoing very effectively. What's good, and probably the only what will come and is coming to the market, is romosozumab. This is new treatment option. It was accepted by FDA, but also by European Medicine Agency. So the treatment is starting in all is coming to the market in most of the countries. Romosozumab is a humanized monoclonal antibody, and the effect is to inhibit sclerostin. And sure, you know that sclerostin is a protein which is secreted by osteoclasts, and it leads to reduced bone formation. That means if you use romosozumab, it has very potent effect as osteoanabolic drug. There are some new studies coming, the FRAME and ARCH. Both studies are in postmenopausal women. In one of them is romosozumab against placebo during first year, and after then denosumab is used. In the other one is romosozumab against alendronate, and the next year of the treatment alendronate is used in both groups. And what's the result of the FRAME? There is significant reduction of the first clinical fracture during first year of the treatment, because the treatment was 1 year with romosozumab against placebo, and also the effect on non-vertebral fracture was found in the other of the studies in the ARCH trial after 1 year of the treatment. Then we have the data about extension, because it's recommended that romosozumab should be used 1 year, and after then it should be used any of the anti-resorptive drugs. That means denosumab in this case, or in the other one it's alendronic acid. And what you can see that the percentage change in BMD after 2 years. That means the combination romosumab and denosumab. The most effective is the combination, that 1 year of romosumab and the other one of denosumab. That means the combination of osteoformation drug and anti-resorptive drug together. Safety data looks also very good. That's why the treatment was accepted on the markets of US, but also on the European one. Very recent data that romosozumab is very effective on the bone microarchitecture, and if you use the TBS, what I told before, that we are doing that, and it's very quick and very good possibility how to check the bone quality, and there are results that the TBS was very nicely influenced by the treatment. Here you have the summary of the romosozumab. So mostly effect on the bone formation, but also effect on the bone resorption. Very quick and rapid increase of bone mineral density after half year, and the reduction of the fractures after this 1 year. Also, if the patient are treated with transition from the bisphosphonates, romosozumab was effective and increased the BMD after half year. And sure, we know that the combination of romosozumab and any of the anti-resorptive drug, the most promising data are with denosumab, looks like very effective, and from the pathophysiology point of view, also very safe and logical option. This slide looks very crowded, but I like that because this slide shows you what's nowadays the most important in the treatment. That means we should categorize the patient if they are in low risk of the fracture or high risk, and after then, if we check that, we will continue although with bisphosphonates or with denosumab, or if it's very high risk, we can use teriparatide or romosozumab, and after some years we will check the risk factors. That means mostly with DEXA, and mostly the hip finding of the DEXA, but also other risk factors, and if we should continue or not. And there are also recommendations how long should we treat the patient, and I will just show that in not so crowded slide later on. But before I go to that slide, I must add that the worst in the treatment of the osteoporosis is that still we have a huge treatment gap. And you know that the treatment gap means that the number of people who has any disease and they are not treated because of this disease. So it's always in percentage of the people who don't get the treatment what's necessary for them to have. And we performed a huge European cross-section study in some of the countries in the women over 70 years in the primary care, in the colleagues who were involved in the trial, and we found that about 75% of the women were in the high risk, and they didn't received any treatment. And if they had densitometric exam, then the treatment gap was also high, but not so high than if there was no densitometry. So our result is that sure, we should perform densitometry and after the treatment, but start with densitometry. Here you can see how the situation was in our country, but in general it's more important. You can see also the countries who were involved in the trial, and really about 75% of the women didn't receive any treatment, although they were in increased risk of the fractures. Here is the conclusion, as I told before. So if we are speaking about treatment, we must speak about staying on the treatment, because if the patients don't stay on the treatment, then sure, the risk of the fracture is going up, and the adherence to the treatment of the osteoporosis as to other chronic disorders is unfortunately very, very low. So maybe what can help also in increasing of the adherence is to tell to the patient how long he should stay on the treatment. And here you have in easier form what it was on the crowded slide with the recommendations of the American Endocrine Society. So if we treat patient with PTH or teriparatide, the treatment is 18 to 24 months. For denosumab, it's long-term treatment, about 10 years. The same we have for SERMs, and for bisphosphonates, if the risk is not so high or is mild, mostly is recommended to treat 5 years. If you use zoledronic acid, it can be also 3 years, and in high-risk patients, you should also treat 10 years, but you can also use the holidays and then start with the treatment. All the time when you are stopping the treatment, you should check the risk profile of the patient and to ask the patient to come in 1 or 2 years for the controls, and the patient should use calcium and vitamin D supplementation during this time. So as I told before, the adherence to the treatment is the most important one, and when the adherence is going down, then the fracture risk is going up. And we performed some years ago a huge survey about the adherence to the osteoporotic treatment, and we found that the best adherence is to the treatment where the frequency of the treatment is low. That means if we treat the patient with injection every 6 months or every infusion every 1 year, it's much more better than the adherence than if the treatment is in much more frequent way. So let me finish what are the new themes and trends in the treatment of the osteoporosis. We are speaking about optimal use of a bone-forming agent, and we have romosozumab in these days. Very important is that we have treatment sequences, and we are coming back as it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, that it's good to start with bone-forming agent and after that to use anti-resorptive drug, or we can combine it in opposite way. Then sure, call to the action, that means to focus on all the patients who are not treated, and mostly the patients suffering from the fracture, that I am speaking now about the secondary prevention. What to do with the patient stopping denosumab, we will hear that later on, what we should do. We have many new meta-analyses, what's good, and we can find new information from that. Nowadays, very important is and very promising is to use artificial intelligence, and it's already used in many practice, not only in research. And sure, we need and we are glad that we have also many good data from large, good quality databases. So it's the summary. Successful secondary fracture prevention must be a reality. The risk of fracture is highest over the 24 months following a fracture, so we should focus on these patients mostly. The classification of patients all the time, if there is a risk profile, low, high, or very, very high, and it helps how to efficiently use the good therapeutic intervention to use mostly hip BMD measurement, to use FREX, adapted for not only for BMD but also for TBS, so it's also something what's new. And all these data and treatment option can provide a massive opportunity for us to do best for our patients. So let me finish with thanks for your attention, and stay healthy. And I must finish with the word that Slava Ukraine. Thank you very much.